Greetings and welcome to In-Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. We are still at the Government Campus Plaza Auditorium where we would have had the inaugural Resilience and Innovation Public Lecture Series hosted by COSTAATT. With that in mind, we had to try to take the opportunity to speak with President of the College of Science, Technology and Applied Arts of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Keith Nurse, to get an idea of why an event like this, as well as the further efforts and initiatives of COSTAATT. Thank you for making the time, Dr. Nurse. How you do?
I'm great. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
It was definitely my pleasure. It makes me feel as though we're having this conversation, and I'm saying that the food is not denied because we've been trying to speak for a while, so very happy to do so. But in terms of this initiative that happened today, why did COSTAATT feel the need to roll out or to implement something like that?
Well, this public lecture series is entitled Resilience and Innovation. And often people ask me, well, why is it called that? And in my own research and at COSTAATT, we have reframed our value proposition on notion that resilience comes through innovation. And it's not just technological innovation we're talking about social innovation as well. So things like social entrepreneurship, public policy, innovation as well, are all critical areas where resilience can be manifest. But why now? Well, the Caribbean and many other parts of the world, particularly small island developing states, are faced with a series of crises that are all colliding, converging, and so on. So of course we talk about climate change and the impact that's having on small island developing states, but it's also the issues of economic instability. Many of our traditional exports have declined in value. Our share of global value added has declined considerably as well, and high levels of indebtedness. And then there are social issues. Of course, crime and social justice are at the top of the heap on everyone's agenda. But, undergirding that is a clear concern about whether or not our societal infrastructures are keeping a pace with global transformations, as well as local transformations. So young people's interests and demands for education, are we keeping up with it? I suspect not. And not just here in Trinidad and Tobago, it's across the Caribbean. So if you look at the data for what's called by the acronym, sorry, I forget what the acronym is, but those who are not in training or in education, or in some form of social employment, those numbers are rising. So there's a significant share of the population that are marginalized from the economic space, and so it's flowing over into these illegal activities, criminal activities, and so on. So at COSTAATT, we are not just sitting by. So for example, we train a lot of people in the security and protective services. And we are also now engaging directly in providing training for the formerly incarcerated. In fact, we are building out a prison to college pipeline, recognizing that if we can reduce the recidivism rate, the rate at which people are returning back into the prison and criminal justice system, that can help to alleviate some of the crime scenario here in Trinidad and Tobago.
And I think you actually have someone who would have come through this system already being one of the facilitators of that program?
Yes, so we like to walk the talk. And so we've actually hired a young man formerly incarcerated. In fact, he spent half of his life in incarceration, and he's now on staff with us, and he's one of our advisors to this program which we call Link Up. And as we're rolling it out, he's been really critical to help us keep it real. And so when we go out to engage with certain populations, he is one of our spokespersons. In fact, he'll be representing us at a conference in South Africa next year, talking about these issues.
How do you feel? Because it's one thing to say, okay, well, you may be removed from something and say, okay, well, theoretically, this may be a good idea. How do you feel when you see it rolling out, and what kind of emotions does it invoke? Same, because as an economist, I'm sure in terms of like dealing with that, those ones and zeros and what is on paper, when you see the human and the social aspect of it, what does that inspire within you?
Well, one of the advantages that COSTAATT has is that our focus is on applied learning. So in many of the areas that we offer academic training, there's a strong internship program, and also a strong set of mechanisms for us to engage with what we call communities of practice. So it's not just theoretical. We get our hands dirty as well. And in that respect, we're working with people in the protective services as well as people who are dealing with those who are formerly incarcerated. So we are bringing together a congregation almost of the interested and those who are prepared to make a difference. And so this is where the rubber hits the ground. And we are making a difference, I think, in these specific areas, and we plan to expand. So for example, we have just started an upskilling academy. And the first area that came as an opportunity was in the circular economy. So we've attracted some funding from the Inter-American Development Bank through the IDB Lab, and we're doing it in conjunction with the Cropper Foundation. So the circular economy is a fairly new idea. We've been doing the research, the background research, to understand what's happening in Trinidad and Tobago, who are the firms or the players, and what are they doing on the ground. The second phase is where we start doing some training with those firms and entrepreneurs who are working in circular economy space. And then we build out into an incubator and an accelerator where there's financing, so that we actually put some money where our talk is.
And hopefully we're able to talk about that as a distinct conversation, because I had my ear to the ground and I heard some of the figures that will be put in play, and just in terms of the opportunity that will be coming forth from that, that is something that I want to speak to distinctly. But I really think it's important that COSTAATT is doing something like this and involved in initiatives like this, because from what I understand, there is a thrust to scaffold learning, to have things in play so that a person who is living life and going through the challenges and just the day-to-day that life is, they're not excluded from being able to build capacity to move from where they are to where they want to be. And with that in mind, though, what are some of the things that, because even looking at what it is you're doing now, looking at the event that we are at, even you just spoke of upskilling. Are there special things put in place that allow people who are working to be able to further studies, to be able to build capacity? Is that a specific thrust of the institution?
Yeah. Well, our mantra at COSTAATT, our renewed mantra, if I could call it that, is to meet people where they are at. So I like your term, scaffolding, if I could borrow it. So we've created a set of scaffoldings that would allow for entry in different areas depending on people's needs. So we've started something called COSTAATT which has two dimensions. Those who want to come into higher education and don't necessarily have the matriculation requirements, we design a program for them. And the second component of that is to reach out to secondary school students who want to start their college experience and earn credits even before they finish secondary school. So that's another element of the college start process. But on the entrepreneurial side, and for maybe the adult learner, or those who are so minded to be entrepreneurs, we've created this upskilling academy. So in effect, it's open to all and sundry. We've identified 6 key sectors. So the circular economy fits into our sustainability and climate change area. But we have areas focused on agri-entrepreneurship, which has not traditionally been an area that we've worked in at COSTAATT. But interestingly enough, the Link Up program, that's where the formerly incarcerated said to us that they want to be trained. So we will be doing training in agri-entrepreneurship, particularly with the Link Up program that I mentioned earlier. But there's also creative industries, medical technologies or med tech. We're looking at cybersecurity and digital entrepreneurship. We're looking at tourism and hospitality and destination management, and so on. As you can see, the goal is to target the growth sectors in the global economy and to position our entrepreneurs and our people doing our degrees, because we've also converted or reinvented some of our academic programming. So our bachelor degree and associate degree programs are also dovetailing with what you're seeing in the Upskilling Academy.
And with that, we take a short break. We're speaking with President of COSTAATT, Dr. Keith Nurse. Stay with us. We'll return with more. Welcome back. We are speaking with President of COSTAATT, Dr. Keith Nurse, and looking at some of the opportunities that are available, some of the initiative where some of the energies lie. Earl Lovelace, he asked the question, what will we do with what we have done? And I want to ask the question, is research being done on the work that is being done? So like the Link Up program, is research being done that will help to determine, so it's almost as though it's an exercise in praxis, thinking about what it is you're going to do, you act, and then you look at that to see how you can go forward and do it a little more efficiently, a little better. Mm-hmm. Is work like that happening? Oh
yes, so the Link Up program has a strong research component built into it. So we believe in evidence-based policy. So we're going to practice what we preach. And so we'll be doing the monitoring and assessment of the program as we proceed. And so the first wave or the first phase is going to be assessed, monitored, and then when we do phase 2, or if we're doing a second program, we infuse those insights into that process. So it's very much an applied process, which we are adopting. And we say that that's what differentiates us from some of the other institutions in the higher education landscape. We actually are engaged in building out experiences in tandem with those who are operating in the community, doing the work. So we have a strong engagement with the non-governmental sector, but also with the governmental sector, because we do a lot of training with institutions in the government of Trinidad and Tobago, and there's increase now for us to do it outside of Trinidad and Tobago.
And to that level of engagement, because you spoke to speaking to potential students, or sometimes I even like to call it participants in learning, because it feels as though there's more of a level of empowerment with it. What are some of the things that, or outline the process that goes into creating a new academic program or course In terms of, is it a matter of saying, okay, well, do we have a cohort? Do we have someone to facilitate this level of learning? What are some of the things that goes through?
Yeah, well, you can't have a program without learners. So in that sense, it's a demand-driven process. But there must be some supply as well, and supply capability. And so do you have the lecturers, the facilitators, and then you need the infrastructure, which at the college means all sorts of things now. So particularly in a post-pandemic period, the online infrastructure, some people actually think that it's easier. In fact, it requires a lot more upfront investment. And so the infrastructure that we now have to put in place to train in a hybrid environment is actually comes in with a higher price tag. And so, but it also comes in with a higher skills basis, so that our staff, we've had to train them to teach in this new learning environment. And so it hasn't come without a cost.
But looking at that and looking at that cost, I remember someone saying is lonely in the future, but trying to pierce the veil and say where the need will arise. So, and being proactive with that. What are some of those things that you'd like to see a little more of, or you think that looking at the lay of the land from the different hats that you wear, there's a little more that's needed of?
Well, I would say the first thing is that Trinidad and Tobago underestimates the size and the value of its higher educational sector. When I first joined COSTAATT, we had a meeting with the Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago, and I asked the question, almost sheepishly, how many higher educational institutions are there in Trinidad and Tobago? There are in excess of 50. Accredited, non-accredited, locally based, those that are from outside. It's a very competitive landscape. But it's also that Trinidad and Tobago has often and largely viewed higher education, in particular, and education generally, as a social sector. Well, the impact that it has on the economy is hugely significant. You know, we couldn't be having this interview if you weren't trained and if I wasn't trained. Most of our businesses wouldn't be able to be successful and competitive if they didn't have trained staff. In fact, that's the most important requirement, what we're seeing in the global economy, as what we call a skills-first approach to understanding the economy. And thirdly, higher education is critical for innovation, because at higher educational institutions, we do the research that often undergirds the new technologies. In fact, the new technologies can't be birthed without people doing that kind of sophisticated research. But there's also applied research that is being done in higher education that stokes the fire of innovation. And so, higher education is not just about the classic training process. It's more than that. It involves increasingly now facilitating, for example, a startup sector. How do you create a mechanism for new entrepreneurs to come into the economic landscape? So just 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting with tech entrepreneurs in conjunction with the International Trade Center out of Geneva. And so they are running a program targeting Trinidad along with several other Caribbean countries to take tech entrepreneurs, about 20 of them, through a training process and then taking them to the marketplace in North America and Europe. And COSTAATT is assisting in that process. So that's the role that we play, beyond just providing certification. That's the old school approach to understanding higher education. We're not just handing out degrees anymore. We're actually creating life experiences and life opportunities, and that's where we are redirecting COSTAATT's role and mandate.
I'm so glad you say that, because some people say that, okay, well, they've come out with this piece of paper, but they're not necessarily the most functional. So in terms of, you've used the word training a little bit in this last piece, where should training leave us, and what kind of import do you put training as being involved, building muscle memory, building reps, versus being in something that has the strict kind of parameters of a classroom setting?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, our legacies from our education system was all about bookwork and passing exams. The world has moved on, and I'm not discounting the importance of these things. It's just that you're quite correct. Can you do the job? And so what we're seeing with many of the major corporations is that they are accepting people without degrees. It's a competence-based approach to employment now. So they want to know, what can you do? Not what certification do you have. And so you see it even on television. You see some of the big global companies saying, we will take you with whatever you have. And we will train you as well. So training is no longer something that's restricted to educational institutions. You now have private institutions. So for example, Sandals has its own university. They're training staff in the Sandals methodology of hospitality and service delivery. Amazon has its own training facility, and the list goes on and on and on. So higher educational institutions now have to think differently about how we approach our role and mandate. And I'm saying to you that at COSTAATT, we've evolved. And we are building out, for example, a tech hub where we would introduce or put at the disposal of our students and those who are in our skilling academy the new fourth industrial revolution technologies. Are we training enough people to use 3D printing, drones, robotics, AI, and the list goes on? And the answer to that question is no, 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 no. So it's as though the world is sailing along and we are stuck in an old modality. The longer we stay there, the harder it gets to catch up. And so at COSTAATT, we don't believe in waiting around. We are surging ahead, building capacity with strategic partners, and reaching beyond the boundaries of Trinidad and Tobago to, bring capacity to our people here in Trinidad and Tobago and across the region.
And with that, we want to thank you, and we want to thank you on behalf of the entire TTT News team. This has been In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. Thank you so much for joining us.